The year is 1943, one of the harshest years of World War II, and while countries were trying every possible way to gain superiority over one another, they were also striving to become the winning side, no matter the outcome, by acquiring weapons and technologies that no one had yet possessed through scientific research. Of course, among these studies, there were also some fantastical ideas. One of these ideas was to make warships, which were extremely important and among the most valuable assets of the war, invisible to submarine radar systems. Yes, giving invisibility to a ship, in other words, camouflaging it, has always been one of the most important subjects of military research. It has appeared throughout history in various forms, and making an object, a vehicle, especially a military asset invisible to radar is a technology that is still applied and worked on even today. However, when we talk about invisibility in this video, we will not be talking only about not appearing on radar. We will take the subject one step further and talk about the possibility of being invisible to the naked eye as well. If you are ready, let's begin. In October 1943, the American military conducted an experiment at the Philadelphia harbor in Pennsylvania, and the ship named USS Eldridge, which was part of the inventory at the time, was deemed suitable for this experiment. Massive generators developed based on one of the most important theories of Albert Einstein, who had migrated from Germany during the war and was considered one of the greatest scientists of his time, even of history, the unified field theory, were installed on the ship. The purpose here was to create a very powerful electromagnetic field around the ship using these generators and, by bending light, make the ship invisible both to radar and to the naked eye. Similar tests had been conducted during the summer of the same year, but when the switch was flipped for the experiment in October, something completely unexpected and unimaginable occurred. As soon as the generators began operating with a loud noise, an extremely dense green fog appeared and enveloped the ship, and when the fog dispersed, shockingly, the ship was nowhere to be seen. The ship had become invisible. But this was not the most striking point. People aboard another ship located 350 kilometers away in Norfolk, Virginia, were about to experience the most unforgettable moment of their lives. USS Eldridge suddenly appeared before their eyes in Norfolk and then disappeared again. What was even more remarkable was that the time recorded by the people who witnessed this event was 10 minutes earlier than the time the ship disappeared in Philadelphia. While the original goal was to make a ship invisible to radar, they had accidentally discovered both teleportation and time travel. Suddenly, the ship appeared 20 minutes after Norfolk and 10 minutes after Philadelphia. However, the incident ended in a horrific way. During this teleportation, many of the crew members aboard the ship vanished, while some reappeared fused into the walls of the ship. Those who remained completely lost their sanity, and in order to make them forget that this experiment had taken place, various methods such as brainwashing and memory erasure were allegedly used, or more accurately, they were silenced, until 1955, when a researcher and scientist named Morris Jessup published a book titled The UFO Phenomenon. Although this book was not a bestseller, it caused quite a stir at the time. It became one of the books that certain groups kept close to them even back then and even today. Scientists who believed in UFOs were considered very important because in this book, Jessup put forward certain claims regarding UFO technology. However, the actual event here was not directly related to the main subject of the book, but rather to someone who developed a very subtle theory inspired by the book. A person whose real name was Carl M. Allen and who used the alias Carlos Allende sent a strange and mysterious letter to Morris Jessup after reading the book. In this letter, he described in great detail the experiment we just mentioned and what happened to the ship, claiming that he had directly witnessed this experiment conducted by the U.S. Navy and that he wanted to reveal the truth. These claims caught Jessup's attention. Although he did not believe them at first, the extreme level of detail troubled his mind, so he did not remain indifferent and replied to the letter. However, when the accounts in the subsequent letters became highly contradictory, Jessup concluded that there was something abnormal about the situation and stopped responding, effectively closing the matter for himself. But even though Jessup had closed the matter in his own mind,
the story did not end there. In 1957, several employees working in the Scientific Research Division of the U.S. Navy contacted Jessup. Apparently, they had received a package containing Jessup's book about UFOs, along with pages filled with handwritten notes. What was strange was that these notes were presented as if they had been written by 3 different extraterrestrial beings and contained theories linking the contents of the book to the Philadelphia experiment. When Jessup examined these notes, he immediately understood what was going on. He recognized the errors in the handwriting and the strange punctuation, and it was exactly the same handwriting as that of Carl Allen who had sent him the letters. After this incident, Carl Allen was admitted to a mental institution, and in this way the matter was supposedly covered up. However, there is a striking detail that has caused this subject to be seriously debated even today. The author of the book, Morris Jessup, committed suicide in 1959, exactly 2 years after being visited by government officials, by pulling his car into a remote area, leaving the engine running, and directing the exhaust fumes into the vehicle. This detail gives the story a completely different dimension. Whatever you may have thought since the beginning of the story, this final suicide must have planted a seed of doubt in the back of your mind whether you wanted it or not. So then, let's water those seeds a little. As we mentioned, the question of whether this tragic ending was truly a suicide or a cover-up has never been fully resolved. Although it did not attract much attention until the 1980s, a film released in 1984 would cause the dusty file to be reopened. The name of the film was The Philadelphia Experiment. The film did not present the story exactly as Carl Allen had described it. Instead, it altered the story a bit and focused on 2 sailors aboard the USS Eldridge who find themselves having traveled 40 years into the future and the events they experience afterwards. However, the real turning point came about 4 years after the film's release, when a man named Al Bielek, who had watched the film, came forward. What made this even stranger was that Bielek actually served aboard the USS Eldridge during the period in question. After watching the film, Bielek claimed that the memories erased by the military to prevent him from remembering what had happened suddenly resurfaced. He went even further, stating that the experiment conducted in 1943 was real and that he himself had been teleported to August 21, 2137. He also claimed that he had been involved in a project known as the Montauk Project, which was allegedly a continuation of the Philadelphia experiment and aimed to achieve time travel, and that he had later visited the 27th century as well. If you are curious about what he claimed to have seen with his own eyes during that time, let me briefly explain. Bielek stated that in the 28th century, the world population was nearly 300 million, that many people had vanished from the Earth, and that the world was being governed by computers. When we return to the year 1994, a French astrophysicist and self-described UFO researcher named Jacques Vallée once again brought this topic out of the dusty archives and publicly called on anyone who knew anything or had any insight into the matter to contact him. Following this call, a person named Edward Dudgeon reached out to Vallée. Edward, in a sense, became one of those who put a final point to this question-mark-filled story. He claimed that he had been serving on another ship near the USS Eldridge during the time the alleged experiment took place, and acknowledged that the U.S. military and scientists were indeed conducting certain experiments during that period. However, he stated that the actual purpose of these experiments was to make ships invisible in a different sense, and that it was crucial to distinguish between the literal meaning of invisibility and its meaning in military terminology. In military literature, invisibility is used to mean camouflage, and he explained that the military was working on a technology that manipulated the magnetic field around ships by creating a type of electric field in order to protect them from mines and torpedoes. From this perspective, what we are talking about is simply a standard military project. Edward also provided an explanation regarding the greenish fog that was allegedly seen around the ship, stating that it was caused by a powerful electric current generated in a localized area similar to what is observed during volcanic eruptions and known as St. Elmo's fire, a phenomenon that somewhat resembles lightning. He said that this is a very natural occurrence that can sometimes be seen on airplanes or ships, and that such events usually produce a glow that is closer to blue than green. So, Carl Allen may indeed have seen something, but regardless of what he saw, the story he constructed in his mind based on those observations turned into one of the longest-lasting and most influential pieces of fiction in history. Yes, governments do conduct secret experiments, and this was especially common during World War I. In the United States in particular, such projects are classified as highly secret, and their details are never shared with the public, meaning that many states feel compelled to cover up certain matters and carry out highly classified experiments. However, whether the event described here actually took place remains a great mystery to this day. So, what do you think? Was this event a conspiracy fabricated by a few people, or were they truly right but silenced? Let's discuss it in the comments.